but we're not going to compromise with full human dignity. And so they kept walking to work rather than riding in the segregated buses. And this, as a 15-year-old young person, had a great impact on me. Gee whiz, there is a different way to struggle than this age-old method of war and violence. Well, partly inspired by that experience in Montgomery, I went to Howard University, which is a black university in Washington, D.C. And in 1960, when students in the South began challenging segregation at the lunch counters, essentially everything was segregated at that time. Lunch counters, movie theaters, bathrooms, drinking fountains, motels, etc. Even African UN diplomats driving from New York to Washington could not eat along the highway in Maryland, could not sleep in motels, etc. And so when the sit-ins began in the South, some of us at Howard University thought, gee whiz, what's happening around here? And while things were integrated in Washington, D.C., in Maryland, Virginia, everything was segregated. So we started going up to Maryland every weekend, my black friends and me, going to a drugstore or a restaurant, and they would close it down and arrest us, and we would spend the weekend singing freedom songs in prison. And on Monday morning, they would release us, and we'd go back to our classes until the next Saturday morning when we'd do the same. Well, the state of Virginia had passed a law saying anybody that sat in Virginia would get a year in prison and a $1,000 fine. And we thought we had better things to do with our lives than go to prison for a year and try to scrape together $1,000, which is a lot of money in those days. So we kept going to Maryland, rather than to challenge this. Well, the American Nazi Party was down in Virginia and threatening to kill anybody that challenged the segregation laws. And in June, after our final examinations, we finally decided somebody's got to challenge this law. And 12 of us went through additional nonviolence training. How do you actually respond nonviolently in the face of horrendous violence? And we went to a People's Drug Store, which in Arlington, which is essentially just across the river from Washington, D.C., but it was as if it was in Mississippi in terms of the mindset. And within a couple minutes, the lunch counter had been closed, and we could hear sirens coming from every direction, and we thought, here goes our year in prison. But the lunch counter owner did not want to arrest us because of bad publicity, but he also wasn't going to serve us any food. So we stayed there at the lunch counter on the stools for 2 days, waiting for something to eat. And obviously we got increasingly hungry. But it was the most difficult 2 days of my life, not because of the hunger, but because of what we had to face. American Nazi Party did come in with their swastikas, saying, is we or is we ain't equals, with pictures of apes. People put lit cigarettes down our shirts, people spat at us, people punched us in the stomach so hard that we would fall on the floor, and then they'd proceed to kick us. And finally, toward the end of the second day, I was meditating on the Sermon on the Mount, on loving your enemies. And a guy came up from behind me and said, you nigger lover. And I turned around and looked at him and had the most terrible look of hatred in his eyes, and in his hand was a switchblade. He says, if you don't get out of the store in 2 seconds, I'm going to stab this through your heart. And then I had 2 seconds to decide, do I really believe in nonviolence, or is that a nice thing to talk about in Sunday school and in a nonviolence class? And but we'd had a lot of practice, and I just looked him in the eyes and I said, well, friend, do what you believe is right, but I'll still try to love you. And his jaw began to drop, and his hand that was like this began to fall, and he left the store. And that was kind of a powerful experience in terms of the power of nonviolence. But then we did something even more difficult. This had been on the front page of the Northern Virginia paper, and 500 people were gathered outside with rocks and stones and said, let's kill these folks, these troublemakers. Because we were disturbing the peace. I mean, there had been peace there before anybody challenging segregation. Peace. Everybody stayed in their place. And we wrote a statement in which we appealed to the religious and community and political leaders of Arlington, Virginia to use their influence to get the eating facilities open to everybody. But we said, if nothing changes in a week, we're going to be back. And that's what was very, very difficult. In 1 week, we'll be back. And some friendly media people got us out alive, I'm happy to say. And when we crossed the bridge into Washington, D.C., it was like, we're entering freedom land. And literally, we shook in our shoes for 6 days, so we have the courage to go back and do this again. And on the 6th day, we got a phone call, and the eating facilities have been open in Arlington. And what I learned was 12 students with some courage had been able to make some change that could have happened 100, 200 years earlier. And somehow we had touched the hearts and consciences of the political, religious, community leaders, business leaders of that city to do what they could have done 100 years earlier. So anyway, that was kind of the beginning of my lifelong career in trying to experiment with the power of nonviolence, or as our government would say, be a troublemaker, a disturber of the peace, or disturber of the war, as I prefer to say. Well, I've been involved in helping build nonviolent movements ever since. During the Vietnam War, we were actually putting our bodies in front of ships that were carrying bombs to Vietnam. We called it the People's Blockade. We were in small canoes and small sailboats. We were threatened with 20 years in prison, but we said, if this ship with all its bombs and munitions reaches its destination, that's going to be much worse than us getting 20 years in prison, in terms of what these are our brothers and sisters that are going to die. And on the day that the first ship that we blocked was lifting up anchor and heading out to sea, and we were paddling madly to try to stay right in front of that ship, 7 of the sailors, way up high on the ship, jumped into the ocean and began swimming toward our little peace flotilla, and which was on nationwide television in the New York Times. And our courage had given them some courage. Their courage helped encourage others in the military to begin doing what they really believed deep down, that this was an immoral, illegal, stupid war, and to begin to resist that war. And if you've seen Sir, No Sir, the United States couldn't fight anymore because the soldiers wouldn't fight, they wouldn't shoot. Work on the nonviolent campaign against nuclear power here in California, against Livermore Nuclear Weapons Labs, which is developing a whole new generation of nuclear weapons. Nuremberg Actions, where we did a campaign right here at Concord Naval Weapons Station, where the United States has been shipping bombs and munitions all over the world ever since the Second World War. In the 80s, when we discovered that they were sending bombs and munitions to kill our brothers and sisters in Nicaragua and Guatemala, El Salvador, we began blocking those trains which were carrying those bombs. And we called them Nuremberg Actions, because we weren't breaking any law from our point of view. We were upholding international law, which says individuals have a responsibility to disobey orders which are crimes against humanity and crimes against war, and to be silent is to be complicit in those crimes. So we couldn't remain silent when right here in our backyard, we were shipping bombs that were going to kill children, women, old people. So that campaign continued for years. I got my arm broken. My friend Brian Wilson was run over and had a big hole in his head and got his legs cut off. But we were really saying, this is a world in which we're all brothers and sisters. As Brian said to the commander in the base, our lives are not worth more than the people of Central America, and their lives are not worth less. That's a very radical idea. Because in America, we like to think we're more important than anybody else. They give us their oil and they give us their fruit and all our manufactured goods, and they have the privilege of serving us as Americans because we're more important. And we're not the only nation like that. But so to really say we're all brothers and sisters and have a responsibility for one another is pretty radical. Well, as Michael said, in 1999, a gathering of 9,000 peace activists came together in The Hague, in the Netherlands, to look at how can we put an end to war, which is even a bigger challenge than how to stop segregation at lunch counters. And as you know, at the beginning of the last century, about 10 or 15% of the people who were killed in wars were civilians. By the end of the last century, it was more like 90 to 95%. This is UN figures. Are civilians, are people that don't have guns, that have nothing to do with, do I hate those people or are those my enemies? They're just common human beings who've gotten caught up and they get killed. And that's the normal way that we're using to try to resolve conflict in this world. Is wars, where 90% of the people that die are going to be innocent civilians. And our governments, as you know, keep saying, well, wars are the only way to really secure our country. And we're going to be men. We're not going to put up with second-class military stuff. So here we were, 9,000 people looking at how do we put an end to war. And unfortunately, at that very moment in Kosovo, where there was ethnic cleansing going on against the ethnic Albanians, President Clinton went on worldwide television and radio and said, in the face of this ethnic cleansing, we have two choices. We can look the other way and pretend it's not happening, or we can go in and start bombing. And I had been in Kosovo for 3 years, before that, and I had witnessed and worked with people that were trying to build a nonviolent movement and said we need to use much more active nonviolent resistance to change this Milosevic dictatorship. But we need international people to be here present. David, can you find the people to come and be present with us? And I spoke and I talked and I went on radio and television saying, Kosovo is an explosion waiting to happen. They want to build a nonviolent movement, but need international presence. Can you come? And everybody said, where's Kosovo? Because there had not been a war and nobody even had heard of it. And others said, oh, it sounds very important, but I'm very busy. I'm going to school, I have a job, family, et cetera. And so we didn't go. And it exploded, and lots of violence, and then our president said there's two choices. You can do nothing or you go in and start bombing. And many of us that were at The Hague realized, or we felt that neither of those alternatives were acceptable. It's not acceptable to just look the other way and do nothing, and it's not acceptable to go and start bombing people to show them that killing is wrong. And we knew there was a third alternative, and we'd seen it working with Peace Brigade International and Witness for Peace and these kind of groups. But the world didn't know that there was a third alternative. So we committed ourselves to building a global nonviolent peace force of hundreds and eventually, we hope, thousands of trained nonviolent peacemakers that could go into conflict areas and be that third alternative. And that third alternative is helping provide the political space where local peacemakers and human rights workers can do their work without so much threat of being killed or disappeared. And so starting in 1999, we have been meeting with and working with people all over the world that are doing peacemaking in their own communities and countries and are working together to try to help build this third alternative, a way to really both give moral support to local peacemakers who often feel very isolated and alone in a very repressive and dangerous situation, but also to make it politically safer for them to continue their work by just being eyes and conscience of the world. It's not we need to go in and we will create peace for these poor people that are fighting each other. It's we will help make the political space the safety where they can create that peace. So we now have 94 organizations, peacemaking organizations from all over the world that are working together to create the Nonviolent Peace Force. In 2002, we had our founding conference in India. We have 8 Nobel Peace Laureates who have endorsed this, over 300 key religious, political leaders from around the world. Check out our website, which is just www.nonviolentpeaceforce. And here are some flyers, which you might want to pass around. And if anyone would like to, if anyone would like to be on our mailing list, just sign your name and at least an email, and we will get you updates about what the Nonviolent Peace Force is doing. I spent 2 years traveling all around the world talking with these peacemaking groups, human rights organizations, to ask several questions. One is, do you think that a Nonviolent Peace Force could help make a contribution to creating the peace and justice in your country? And almost everybody said yes, this could be very helpful. And then the second question I asked is, would you like to help work to help make this possible? And many of these people said yes. And as I say, we have 94 organizations. Well, some of the things that we heard from people around the world that should be qualities of this Nonviolent Peace Force. One was the importance of early intervention. Don't wait until after it explodes into violent conflict. The other is the importance of supporting nonviolent movements before they explode into violence, as we should have done in Kosovo, and we passed up that opportunity. The importance of being truly international and representing nobody's national interest. And so we have, in the Nonviolent Peace Force, about half of those 94 organizations are from the global south, from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and half are from the global north. So we're not kind of northern do-gooders trying to do something for our southern brothers and sisters, or vice versa. We're really representing the people of the world. And these are a little bit outdated now, but these are some photographs of our first teams in Sri Lanka, which you can see just by looking at this. There are the faces are people from all over the world. We want to be mainstream. We want to go far beyond the traditional peace movement. My own belief is that there are at least 95% of the people in the world believe in nonviolent resolution of conflict over violence and war. And we need to recruit many of those people into this movement, both as nonviolent peacemakers themselves, but in supporting this financially, etc. We go only at the invitation of local groups, or primarily at the invitation of local groups. We don't say, oh, there's a conflict, I think we should go and help create the peace. We go when a local group says, we are working to try to create peace in this area, we need your support, which is a little less imperialistic. We want to recruit skilled people and make this professional. You know, we're not just kind of do-gooders wanting to go and put our finger in a dike somewhere to try to create the peace. We want people who've been trained and have had some experience doing peacemaking in their own communities, in their own countries, that can be a part of the Nonviolent Peace Force. We are paying people who volunteer to be a part of the Nonviolent Peace Force. Nobody's going to get rich, but the world pays soldiers to be willing to kill and die. And we think that morally we have a responsibility to help financially support people that are willing to risk their lives to help make nonviolence and peaceful solution of conflict real.
There's also the point that people from the global south wouldn't really be able to volunteer if they
right. And we want to get people from all classes in all parts of the world. And many parts of the world, you know, a 25-year-old person helps support the whole family. So this is a way of doing that, paying college loans and that kind of stuff. We want to be nonpartisan, but with a commitment to justice. We're not coming in to say this side is good and that side is bad. But we are committed to justice. You know, long-term peace cannot happen, you know, when there's a terribly unjust situation. Well, and I'll pass this around also. Some of you may have seen this, but it's called What the World Wants. And this is actually a couple years old, so it's a bit out of date. But each of these squares represents $1 billion. And if you look at this whole page, this is what the world spends on the military every year. It's now even much more than this. But way down here at the bottom is how much this amount of money would stop deforestation all over the world. This amount of money would eliminate nuclear weapons from everywhere in the world. This would increase energy efficiency, rid the world of homelessness, of poverty, of hunger and all the diseases. For a very small percentage of what we're spending on the military, we could rid the world of all these problems. And we'd be a whole lot safer and more secure if that's what we're doing with our money. Well, often we don't even think about that stuff. Our government says pay your taxes and 50% of them go to, you know, missiles and bombs and are fighting the war in Iraq, etc. Well, now just last Thursday night I came back from Sri Lanka, and the Nonviolent Peace Force has been asked to come many places around the world, but we have limited amount of money so far. Our budget is probably less than a couple toilets in the Pentagon. But you know, what the Pentagon is doing is much more important than what we're doing, according to our government and many other governments. So at our founding conference, we had to decide among the various choices where should we do our first pilot project, and we decided on Sri Lanka. Partly at that time, there'd been a 18-year civil war, and the two sides had said we're willing to have a ceasefire. So the major contenders had said war is not working. Let's try something else. And we had people that invited us to say, can you come and help really move our country toward peace? Well, unfortunately, in the meantime, a new government has been elected that is essentially saying we're going to win this war militarily, and the Tamil Tigers have said, you know, we're going to win this thing militarily, and the people are getting caught in the middle, just like other places in the world. That 85–90% of the people that are civilians are paying the brunt of this. Well, what the Nonviolent Peace Force is doing, you from Sri Lanka? Okay, well, you're an expert on this. But this is a little picture of Sri Lanka, and this is at the southern tip of India. And this is a primarily Buddhist country. 80% or so are Buddhist, I think. And the Tamil population, I think, is in the range of 10–12%. And they are primarily up in the north and the eastern part of the country. And then there's a smaller Muslim population. And part of the problem there, just like what was happening in Virginia and Alabama, is that 80% is saying, you know, we're the most important people. And the Tamil-speaking people are second-class citizens. You know, they can't learn in school in their language, and you know, a lot of them are fired from their jobs and all this kind of. That's the source of conflict in so many parts of the world. Is the majority says, you know, you guys aren't important. We're the first-class citizens. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that. But anyway, so the Nonviolent Peace Force has teams up in Jaffna, which is totally military-occupied country right now. The almost 95–99% of the population is Tamil or Hindu, but all the military and the police are Sinhalese, Buddhist, and there's soldiers everywhere. I mean, at every street corner and in between, and with tanks. And the road to Jaffna isn't even open right now, so people can't get food and supplies and all this. And we're also over here where there's also primarily a Tamil population, but the military and police are Sinhalese. So these are very, very hot spots. And I think over 6,000 people were killed in this last year. And so that's where we are, right in the middle of these areas of conflict. And what we're doing, one is there's been recruitment of child soldiers. Recruitment of children to become child soldiers. And it's happening on a very broad basis, and by both sides. Both by the Tamil Tigers, and there was a group called the Karuna faction, which the political leader from the east of the Tamil Tigers, his name was Colonel Karuna. He broke away from the Tamil Tigers. But he's now allied with the government, fighting the Tamil Tigers. And so both sides are recruiting children down to the age of 12 or 13. To start using guns and shooting each other. And there are many, many families who've had one child taken by one side and one child by the other, and the father's already been killed in the war. And so these families have come to the Nonviolent Peace Force and say, can you help us? And they are courageously trying to get their children back. And so we're accompanying them and helping train people that are accompanying them. There are peace committees made up of Sinhalese, Buddhist, of Tamils, and of Muslim populations to be people in the local communities that are saying, we've had it with this war. We want to have peace for our children. And so are laying the basis for that kind of peace. They're just